Today I'm going to be tier ranking the 18 horror books I read in 2025. We are continuing on in my end of year series and we have made it to the tier ranking videos. Every year I do 2 videos where I tier rank all of the horror books that I read in the year, and then I do a video where I tier rank all of the mystery and thriller books that I read in the year. Usually I start with the mystery thriller video, but this year I decided to start with the horror video. I did not read as much of this genre this year. I believe last year I was somewhere in the 30s. This year it's only 18, so pretty much cut in half, but 18 is still a lot of books, and that gives me the opportunity to really go in and tell you about every single book that I read in this genre for the year and just catch up on them. Since I have fewer books this year, I have fewer tiers as well, so I will be tier ranking these in the following categories. Obviously at the top, new favorite will be books that are my new favorite. It delivered. I like to keep this category for horror books that I think were pretty good, pretty great, or maybe I don't know if I thought they were good or great for me, but they were very effective in the horror. Because sometimes with a horror book, you don't enjoy it. Sometimes that's not the right word for it, but it delivered. It did what it was trying to do. Then there are books that were not for me for one reason or another, and then there are books that I would actively not recommend. So let's jump on into the list. I did decide to include books that I DNF'd in this list just because I do have fewer books, so I have time to talk about some of the ones I DNF'd. And the first book on this list, The Darkest Night, is a book that I did DNF. This is an anthology of short stories. I believe there's 22 short stories in a 300-something page book, so they were very short stories. They were all wintry, and it just did not capture my attention. It's not that I wouldn't recommend it for any reason. I would just say it wasn't necessarily for me. I feel like I find that I enjoy short story collections more when they are short stories from the same author rather than short stories from a collection of authors. So that one just was not it for me, but it is all wintry, so if you're looking for a wintry horror anthology, maybe you should check that one out. Next up is Grady Hendrix' Witchcraft for Wayward Girls. I read this for Elizabeth's book club earlier in the year. We had a discussion about it and I really liked it. I don't think it was a new favorite for me, but it delivered. It was really good. I gave it a 4-star. I've only read a handful of things from Grady Hendrix, and I have DNF'd a couple of things, and I don't know that I'm always gravitating to his books as much, but co-hosting for the book club convinced me to pick it up, and I was pleased to have a good time with it. It is a historical, more literary type of horror story too that has a lot of themes of feminism, and I thought it was pretty good. At Dark, I Become Loathsome by Eric LaRocca. This one, I'm going to have to say, wouldn't recommend. I very rarely give books 1 star, and this is a book that got a 1 star from me this year. This is a story that could have been really well suited for me, but it just took some turns that I didn't love, and I didn't love the execution of the story altogether. The concept of this is you're following this man who is grieving after losing his wife, and then his son goes missing as well, and he decides to start this really bizarre business where he buries people alive and then resurrects them in a sort of way. And that concept sounds like something that could really resonate with me and the things I like to explore in my horror stories, but I found the story to be very meandering. There's also story within the story elements to this that I found to be distracting, and I really disliked the ending. So it's getting to be really rare to see books in this category for me, but that one has to go there. Knock Knock Open Wide, I would say it delivered. I did have pretty high expectations for this book because I've heard so many wonderful things about it, and I ended up giving it a 3.5-star rating, so I think I was expecting more from it, but I still had a good time with it for what the story was. I remember there being a lot of really strong elements to the story. I really liked the opening, I really liked the ending, there were some really strong things in the middle, but the overall pacing of the story did not flow super well for me. I found the book to be very dense and exhaustive to get through, and I just wanted it to get to the point a little bit faster. It feels like more of a vibes-based book maybe, and there were a lot of memorable vibes to it, so I thought it was okay. It just wasn't exactly what I was expecting. When the Wolf Comes Home by Nat Cassidy is definitely a new favorite. This is such a strange book. It is not what you expect it to be. I have been reading Nat Cassidy since he first published Mary, so I always look forward to his books. I really enjoyed Mary, I enjoyed Nestlings, I enjoyed his novella Rest Stop. But when I first heard this book was coming out, I was a bit hesitant because I don't get that excited about werewolf stories, but this one definitely has some surprise elements to it. It's best to not know much before going into it. It takes a surprising turn, and it was so fantastic. It is just so readable. You don't want to stop flipping the pages. And I think it might be my favorite Nat Cassidy book so far, but I really enjoy them all. So if you haven't read anything from him, I would definitely recommend checking out something from his backlist. This one I'm nervous about because we have Bat Eater and Other Names for Khorasan, and this has been beloved this year. This is like the horror darling of the year, I feel, but it was not for me. In this story, you follow a girl whose sister gets murdered, and then she realizes there's a serial killer going around who's killing Asians and leaving bats around. And I felt like the book was mostly just the synopsis. It felt very predictable to me. I had a pretty boring experience while reading it, which was really disappointing because I saw so many people loving it and giving it 5 stars, and I felt like I just did not have that same experience for some reason. So unpopular opinion for sure, but unfortunately it just was not for me. Perhaps another unpopular opinion, but in the opposite way, The Starving Saints, I would say it delivered. Caitlin Starling has a very interesting writing style. Her books are very much vibes, aesthetic, fever dream weirdness with horror tinged throughout. And this one was medieval and sapphic, and there were bees and honey, and it all just blended together so well for me. It's a book you might walk away from feeling like there wasn't a lot of plot, not a lot of structure. You might feel like, what just happened? But I loved it. I gave it a 4 star, thought it was a really good time. I don't think it's necessarily a new favorite for me, but I really enjoyed it. Next is This Is Not a Ghost Story, and this one unfortunately was not for me. I did end up DNFing this one. It was a book that I had as an ARC from the publisher on NetGalley, and it starts with this guy who's a ghost and he's living in this weird realm, and then he ends up coming to the real world. It really reminded me of the movie Soul from what I read of it, but I just was not getting engaged in the story. And then I never really heard anyone else talk about it throughout the rest of the year, so it didn't really encourage me to give it a second try. A Game in Yellow by Haley Piper. This one was also not for me, and I really thought it was going to be for me. The synopsis of it reminded me of Sarah Grand's The Book of Most Precious Substance, which I really enjoyed, but this one I did not. I ended up DNFing it like 80% of the way in. I was really far in and I still was like, I don't care to keep reading this. The story follows 2 queer women who are looking to spice up their relationship, and then there's this book of like sex magic, but if you read too much of it, it can like drive you crazy, and so it follows them engaging with that. But I did not like the characters. The relationship sucked. The execution felt so dreamy in a way that I felt like I had nothing to grasp onto. There were also sections that had a play, because I think this is based off of a concept, King in Yellow, the Yellow King, something like that. I don't know. It just was not for me. What Hunger very much was for me and is a new favorite. This one really surprised me. If you just watched my most recent video where I talk about my favorite underrated books, you know that I love this one because I included it in that video. It's a coming of age story. It's about female rage. It follows a girl who gets an insatiable hunger for meat. And I just didn't think that would be for me because I've been let down by other books like that. But something about this one just really resonated with me. I really connected to it. I really enjoyed following this character and just all the different themes that are jam-packed in this story. It felt so significant and so concise and well written and well packaged. Really impressive. It was the first thing I've read from this author, so I will definitely be checking out more from her as well. You Weren't Meant to Be Human. I feel like this one at the end of the day was not for me, but I do think it was successful, and so I'm gonna put it in It Delivered. The story is incredibly bleak. It follows a trans man who is forced to go through the pregnancy that he does not want to go through with. There is a sort of cult element that is this cult of like bugs, that is this weird dystopian sci-fi thing that's happening at the same time, but the whole thing is just so bleak, so dreary, so visceral, so much body horror. It makes you feel so bad reading this book, and that's what it's trying to do, and so it is very successful in accomplishing that. But oh man, it was a tough read to get through. For me, that's just not something that, again, like this word enjoy, but that's not like the horror I'm gravitating to at this point. Some years I'm more into that. This year I wasn't into that as much. And this is probably the most bleak one that I read, aside from At Dark I Become Loathsome. I would say they're in the same realm of bleakness, but I appreciated You Weren't Meant to Be Human and its execution more than I did with At Dark I Become Loathsome. So yeah, it delivered. The Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre. I really enjoyed this. I don't know that I'd call it a favorite. It just doesn't feel like a favorite to me, but I gave it a 4-star, and so I'll put it in It Delivered. Again, this one was just featured in my most recent video where I talk about hidden gems. It follows a group of older adults living at a retirement home, and it's a slasher, and your main character is this woman named Rose who is determined to figure out who's doing the slashing and put an end to it, and it was just a very enjoyable read. Hazelthorn was not for me. I wanted to give this author a try because I heard great things about their last book, and then I got an arc of this one through NetGalley. It is a YA gothic fantasy botanical horror type of book. I think I would have enjoyed this a lot more like 3 or 4 years ago with the type of stories I was reading then. Now I just didn't love it as much. It's very lush writing, purpley prose, very atmospheric, very like teenage melodrama feel, which is just not something I'm into as much right now, and so it was not for me. How to Survive a Horror Story was another book club pick that I read this year, so there's a live show about this if you want to check that out. I would say this one somewhere between not for me and It Delivered. Like, I think it was just fine. I did give it a 2-star, so I'm gonna put it in not for me. I like the concept of this. It was about writers, and they were all coming together in this house. They were invited after this famous person dies, and they think it's going to be about inheritance and getting something from the will, but then it turns out that they have to go through this whole situation of riddles and games and whatnot, and it takes some dark turns, but it got really silly, and not in a way where it felt like a good kind of campy, but in a way where it just felt a little bit too silly, and maybe it should have felt more serious or gone more silly and more of a campy direction. I don't know, it just didn't quite work for me. I don't think it was bad, it just wasn't great for me. The October Film Hunt, this one I'm also kind of between It Delivered and not for me, but I feel like this one I would push up into It Delivered. I did give this book a 2.5-star rating, so it did end up right in the middle of my 5-star scale because there was so much to love about it, but there were so many things that I wish would have changed about the story too. But I still remember the way I felt reading this. I can still like feel myself in the atmosphere. It was such an immersive story. It felt like I was watching a horror movie. It's a story about there being this famous director who nobody really knows who they are, and made this film back in the day that got really popular because it had these really weird sequences in them that were like 6 minutes of just shooting on a still image where nothing was happening, and there's all this lore built up around it that was like transfigurations where you were I don't remember if it was communing with the devil or like going to hell or something, but there was, you know, something like haunted happening about that. And your main character is this woman who was in this club where they would go to these famous locations from horror movies, and she ended up doing that and writing about it, and then people started reenacting these rituals, and someone ended up dying performing one of these rituals, and now all these years later she's tried to be in hiding because she got really infamous and basically like canceled on the internet after that happened, and now all these years later people are watching her and filming her and like leaving videotapes of her in her mailbox, and it was so creepy and so atmospheric, but also just not paced the best, and the middle felt really bogged down. But there were also so many things that I liked, and it genuinely scared me reading it, which is not a common experience I have with books. So I think it has good bones. There's a lot to like there. I'll definitely read from the author again. It kind of reminded me of Paul Tremblay's writing style, and I feel like that's a little bit of an acquired taste too, so maybe that's just a situation with this book, and maybe I'll like the next book from the author even more. We Live Here Now by Sarah Pinborough. I'm gonna say this one was not really for me. I really liked it in the beginning. It's a dual POV story. We're following a husband and a wife who are moving into this new house, and she thinks it's haunted and he doesn't believe her. Kind of a pretty basic setup. The beginning felt gripping and fast-paced and interesting, but then it felt like thing happened, except the same things being said and done over and over and over again until like the 90% mark, and it's like, here's this ginormous twist, and you're like, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool, but like, was that worth it to get to this point? So yeah, that one just didn't really work for me. Cackle, I really enjoyed. I would say It Delivered, not necessarily a new favorite, but pretty good. I ended up giving it a 4-star. I feel like this is one of the Rachel Harrison books that I always heard talked about the most before I ever read a book from Rachel Harrison, and this was the second book I read from her, and I had enjoyed both of them. I read So Thirsty first, enjoyed that, gave it a 4-star. Then I read Cackle, also enjoyed that and gave it a 4-star. She has a really interesting niche that she's writing in that's kind of like a cozier horror, but also like darker human themes being metaphorically explored through like popular horror tropes. The last book that's in here is also a Rachel Harrison book, Play Nice, and this one actually didn't really work for me. This one explores generational trauma and complicated family dynamics through a haunted house. Cackle explores a woman going through a breakup, finding herself, figuring out what she's doing next in life, feeling empowered in herself, paired with witches. And now out of the 3 I've read, Play Nice is the only one that didn't totally go great for me. Felt more like a family drama, which I guess Cackle kind of just feels like a drama of a woman, you know, figuring out what's going on in her life, but something about Play Nice just didn't work as nicely for me. That said, 2 out of 3 of her books have been a success for me, so I'll definitely keep reading more from her as well. So that is it for tier ranking all the horror books I read this year. I only ended up with 2 new favorite horror books, which is maybe why I was not reading as much horror throughout the year too, because I just wasn't gravitating towards it as much. But I do have a pretty even distribution of things I liked versus things that I didn't like as much. So there's definitely still things for me to enjoy in the genre. I feel like I'll probably read a little bit more of horror again next year because I've been interested in some of the upcoming horror books a little bit more than I was in this past year. But let me know what you think of my results. Let me know if I convinced you to pick anything up. And the series will be continuing with my next video, which is going to be tier ranking all of the mystery thriller books I read. There's a lot more of those. So if you don't want to miss that, make sure you are subscribed, and you can also hit the bell to be notified when I post. But that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.